Hello guys, and welcome back to the channel. So guys, by now you should have all heard the verdict of the kangaroo court, that was the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal. So you've all heard the verdict. So in this video we're now going to bore into the details of that verdict. So with that guys, I bring you this. Presidential Election Tribunal, 12 key rulings delivered for and against Atiku and Buhari. So that's the headline. Presidential Election Tribunal, 4 key rulings delivered for and against Atiku and Buhari. So that's the headline. So with this video, we're going into the minutiae of this verdict and exactly what transpired in that. I'll call it a court. It's a panel really, but let's call it a court. So we'll go into the details of the minutiae of what transpired in that court. So let's delve into it. The Presidential Election Petition Tribunal has given its verdict on the petition filed by the People's Democratic Party (PDP) and its candidate Atiku Abubakar challenging President Muhammadu Buhari's victory in the February 23rd general election. So here are highlights of the key rulings given by the 5-man panel of justices led by Mohammed Garba. So number 1, tribunal dismisses INEC's motion asking Vice President Osinbajo to be joined in the petition. So that's the first one. Tribunal unanimously dismissed INEC's motion asking Vice President Osinbajo to be joined in the petition, ruling that a vice presidential candidate is not necessarily party in an election petition but an appendage of the presidential candidate who nominated him. So that's the reasons given for dismissing Vice President Osinbajo as a party in the suit. So let's go on to the second judgment that was reached. Number 2, INEC's motion on Atiku's lead counsel, Levi Ozuaku, dismissed. So that's the second item. INEC's motion on Atiku's lead counsel, Levi Ozuaku, dismissed. Tribunal dismisses INEC's motion, arguing that Atiku's lead counsel, Levi Ozuaku, is not a legal practitioner called to the Nigerian bar. So they are actually querying the credentials of this guy even to practice, a guy that's been practicing in Nigeria probably before I was born, somebody over 40 years or 50 years or however long in practice, who has won many cases in the Nigerian courts, is now being deemed not to be legible to practice law in Nigerian courts. So that was dismissed. So we go on to number 3. Number 3, tribunal strikes out INEC's request to dismiss Atiku's prayer seeking Buhari's disqualification. So that's the third one, and that's a big one as well. So let's go into what they said. Tribunal refuses INEC's request to dismiss Atiku's prayer seeking Buhari's disqualification on the grounds that he was not qualified to contest the election. So now this is quite interesting, this particular one. So INEC was asking the panel to dismiss this particular item or this particular position, this particular allegation, this particular insertion, this particular count in the suit. So they are asking the panel to dismiss that, the Buhari qualification thing. The Buhari qualification thing, of course, is a key component, is one of the marquee items within the whole garment of the list of the things that they are alleging against him. So that is a key point, and INEC was seeking that the panel dismiss that. So we can look at this on two fronts. The first immediate reaction would be to say that INEC should not be saying this because the allegation is of course against Buhari. If Atiku's team is saying that Buhari is not qualified, then it is not INEC's position to be standing behind Buhari to say that he is qualified. After all, it is Buhari that they are alleging that is not qualified. So that's the first instinct that you go to. But if you think further, that Buhari not being qualified to run the election is actually an allegation against INEC itself as well, because if Buhari is not qualified to run for the election but INEC allowed him to run for the election, then that's an indictment on INEC itself. So that shows that they are either not doing their job properly or the system has been corrupted. So they were right to challenge that on that basis because the mud splashes onto them as well. So it's not just about Buhari's qualification, but it's also about INEC allowing him to go through if he did not, or if he does not, and he does not have the requisite qualification. I'm still insisting on that, at least not on the documents that he submitted. So that gives a reason for why INEC would have requested that the panel dismiss that Buhari qualification thing, but the panel, of course, refused to dismiss it. So we go on to that was the third item, wasn't it? So we go on to the fourth item. Tribunal strikes out Atiku's application on police and military interference, harassment, and intimidation. So that's number 4. Tribunal strikes out Atiku's application on police and military interference, harassment, and intimidation, ruling on the allegations of police and military interference, harassment, and intimidation, and ballot stuffing, amongst others, filed by Atiku. The panel struck out the application for non-joinder of the parties who have been accused. So a non-joinder is what they have given as a reason for this. And you can interpret that non-joinder to mean that there's no association between Buhari, who is the person being sued, and the police, the people, or the military, the police and the military, the people carrying out the harassment. So they're two separate things. You are suing Buhari, and this is an election petition tribunal. So if you wanted to say there was a police harassment during that election, then that's a separate matter. That is something that probably wants to come under criminality and not really directly to this particular matter, although I feel it applies to this particular matter. So that was number 4. Number 5, tribunal dismisses Buhari's application that Atiku was not qualified to file petition. So that's number 5. Tribunal dismisses Buhari's application that Atiku was not qualified to file petition. Tribunal dismissed President Buhari's application that Atiku was not qualified to file the petition challenging his election, ruling that Atiku is qualified to file the petition. So that's the simple and straightforward one. He's not qualified to do it. Yes, he is qualified to do it. And he is not qualified to do it, of course. They would have been hinging that argument on the Atiku is from Cameroon narrative that they came up with. So that was dismissed out of hand. So we go on to number 6. Tribunal dismisses Atiku's application on vote buying. So that's number 6. Tribunal dismisses Atiku's application on vote buying. Tribunal dismissed Atiku's application accusing Vice President Yemi Osinbajo of inducing voters with trader money scheme, ruling that it does not have jurisdiction over the matter. The tribunal also noted Osinbajo was not a party in the suit and therefore dismissed the application in favor of President Buhari. So now this is a funny one, because we all, of course, saw Vice President Yemi Osinbajo, a law professor at the University of Lagos, not the University of Backwater, one of the leading universities in Nigeria, a law professor from that university, the Vice President of Nigeria, reduced to going around market squares, handing 10,000 naira to market women to buy votes. We all saw it. It was all over everywhere, and he showed it boldly that it is the trader money scheme. The trader money scheme is suddenly being handed out in the midst of an electoral campaign, a presidential electoral campaign, with federal government money, central bank money being handed out by the vice president of the country to trader women, 10,000 naira ago, all over the country. And this was not vote buying. I mean, if that is not vote buying, then there's no such thing as vote buying as far as I'm concerned. And this is quite pertinent to this case as well, because if you are the election petition tribunal and they are telling you that vote buying took place, and you are saying that vote buying taking place is not relevant to the case, or you don't have jurisdiction over it because the person that did the vote buying is not a party to the case, you are saying in one breath that Yemi Osinbajo is an appendage to Buhari and they fall under the same bracket. And we're saying that Yemi Osinbajo, we're not even saying, nobody's saying, we all saw Yemi Osinbajo handing out 10,000 naira all over market squares during the election in Nigeria, claiming trader money. And you are saying that you're not going to listen to that because you have no jurisdiction over it. Jurisdiction over what do you have then? You are the election petition tribunal. This is something that happened at the center of the election, which was a corrupt practice, and you say you don't have jurisdiction over it. So there's a question mark on that, but we carry on. We go on to number 7. Tribunal strikes out APC's argument that Atiku is not qualified to contest because he's not a Nigerian by birth. So that's the 7th one. Tribunal struck out APC's argument that Atiku was not qualified to contest the last presidential election because he is allegedly not a Nigerian by birth. It ruled that its powers does not include determining the qualification of a petitioner in an election dispute, adding that its powers was to determine whether a person elected to the office of the president was validly elected and not to query the qualification of the petitioners to have contested the election whose outcome was being queried. So that's a very funny one, because really I'm not quite sure what the remit of these people is, or if they fully understand the remit of their brief, because you are saying you are not qualified for this and you are not qualified for that. You are not qualified to determine if somebody that is contesting for an election where you are sitting as a tribunal to have oversight on, to see that it was done in a due and proper way and they followed due process. You are not qualified to determine that the people who are contesting for this revered position are qualified to contest for it in the first place. You are not qualified regarding the trader money. You are not qualified for anything. So no qualification, not qualified, is effectively now the theme that is coming out of this panel, and their results, their verdict, their findings is not qualified to. We can all agree on that. So let's carry on. The court said the APC ought to have filed a cross petition if it sought to challenge Atiku's qualification to have contested the election. So that's how that was summed up. So we go on to number 8. Tribunal strikes out Atiku's application on Buhari's educational qualifications. So that's the big one. Tribunal strikes out Atiku's application on Buhari's educational qualifications. The tribunal has ruled that Buhari was educationally qualified to contest for the president. The court in its ruling also said that one's ability to read, write, and communicate in English is seen in law as being equivalent to school certificate level. So now this is a new one now. So you now being able to read, write, and communicate in English is equivalent to school cert. I thought they were going under his military record before, but now this is now the new appendage. So we're now boring into the details of exactly what transpired at that tribunal. So we go on to number 9. Tribunal rules there is no evidence that INEC transmitted election results electronically to any server. So this is another one of the big ones. So tribunal rules there is no evidence that INEC transmitted election results electronically to any server. The tribunal has declared that there is no evidence that INEC transmitted the results of the last presidential election electronically to any server. It held that the petitioners failed to prove the existence of an INEC server or that the Electoral Commission transmitted results electronically, adding there is no law in place in Nigeria that allows electronic transmission of results or the transmission of results using card readers. So that was number 9. We go on to number 10. Tribunal dismisses result presented by Atiku PDP. So that's number 10. The tribunal further dismissed the results which the PDP and Atiku claimed were obtained from INEC's website. It is my view that whatever results you claim to have gotten belongs to a whistleblower. It is possible to use scientific methods to alter data on a website. Therefore, the petitioner relied on information from a third party, and the evidence is unreliable because it is hearsay and inadmissible, Garba said. So Garba, of course, is the lead on this case. So we go on to number 11. Tribunal dismisses alleged malpractice in presidential election. So that's number 11. So we go on to number 11. Tribunal dismisses alleged malpractices in presidential election. So that's number 11. The lead judge listed some of the allegations the PDP and Atiku raised in their petition. The allegations include compromising printing of election materials, manipulation of ballot boxes, manipulation of card readers, manipulation of accreditation and collation, manipulation of security agencies and militarization of the election, manipulation of election materials delivery, arbitrary arrest of petitioners' supporters, and massive thumb printing of ballot papers, etc. He ruled that the evidence presented by the petitioners is not sufficient to prove the monumental allegation of electoral malpractices pleaded. According to Garba, the petitioners have a duty to prove all the allegations which are criminal in nature beyond reasonable doubt. He says there is nothing to show there were malpractices in the presidential election. The evidence put forward by the witnesses called by the petitioners is not sufficient to prove the monumental allegation of electoral malpractices. So now we go on to the 12th and final one. Tribunal dismisses Atiku's petition against Buhari's victory in its entirety. So now that's the final verdict, and that short phrase, that three-word phrase, sums up the totality of everything that transpired. So again, Tribunal dismisses Atiku's petition against Buhari's victory in its entirety. So the court has dismissed Atiku's petition and affirmed President Buhari's electoral victory. I have come to the conclusion that the petitioners have not proved any of the grounds in paragraph 15 as required. For failure of this petition is hereby dismissed in its entirety. So that's what the lead judge said to sum up the totality of everything that transpired in that tribunal. So we waited months and months. We pinned all our hopes on these guys, and the sum total of everything that they have to say is to say that they've dismissed this thing in its entirety. They've dismissed the Atiku case in its entirety, effectively the Nigerian case in its entirety, so thereby submitting us to the gulag that is Malam Buhari and the cabal for another 4 years. So conversations in the comment section. I know this is a fairly lengthy video, but whatever you have made of it, come discuss it with me in the comment section. This is the judgment as per the Election Petition Tribunal, which gave victory to President Buhari, Malam Buhari. So now what you have made of all this is what I am interested in. So let's have a conversation about it in the comment section. But before we have that conversation, click on the red subscribe button so it turns gray. The bell button notifies you every time I drop a new video. Then come, let's have a real discussion around all these things that we've just heard in the comment section. So I'll leave you here, join you in the comment section, but here I say peace.